any stragglers will come dropping in. So as Jeff just said, the Teaching and Learning Academy is thrilled to welcome Flower Darby today to speak to us and to motivate us for teaching excellence, as we are always looking for, especially nowadays after a few years of pandemic. So you can read the bio. We put it up there for you to read during our break here, but Flower has extensive experience teaching both at university and community college level in a variety of subjects. Kind of fascinating, the variety of subjects actually. But you may know her from her, speaking at many conferences, her outstanding book, Small Teaching Online, which has become the Bible for many of us in the last year. And then also from the Chronicle of Higher Education. I've read many an article by her from there. So Flower, thank you so very much for coming today. And we'll turn it over to you.
It is absolutely my joy and my privilege to be here with you today. Thank you very, very much for having me. I'm so excited about the TLA. I got a sneak preview of what you have planned for the year, and it just looks phenomenal. I couldn't recommend it highly enough, even though I don't know a lot about the details, but boy, what you have lined up looks amazing. So really happy to help you kick off this amazing experience. And really what I would like to do today is to kind of give us a boost of renewed energy. I want to remind us, I want to invite us to remind ourselves of why we do what we do, because here's what I know. We are all exhausted. We are all stressed, and the semester that we're looking at coming up here doesn't really look that much better than where we've been in the last couple of years. In fact, I was reading a couple of different higher ed media stories just today about how many faculty members feel like this is an even more challenging semester than fall of 2020, as we are trying to do this and trying to figure out what's going to happen and what are we going to need to do. And the situation is different than it was in this time last year. And again, the tone that I am getting from the higher education teaching and learning community is that it's more challenging because of new factors than it was this time last year. However, we still can do really great things. And that's what I'm here to do today, is to help us again remind ourselves of why we love what we do and how we're going to move forward together to help our students. So let me just talk about housekeeping just for 1 or 2 moments here. I have planned plenty of time at the end for questions and conversation. I didn't model best practice and put a break in the middle. That's because there's so much that I want to share with you, and I only have today, just this limited time. So best practice for teaching live synchronous is not to talk for as long as I'm going to today, but please bear with me on that. I hope that you'll find the material so interesting and engaging, that so much to think about and so inspiring. I hope that you'll be able to stay tuned with me. Plenty of time at the end for your questions and comments. So please keep note of those. I won't, as I said, I didn't plan a break, nor will I really be able to monitor what's happening in the chat box, although I will ask you a couple of questions throughout the talk, and I encourage you to post and interact with each other in the chat box. It's actually a really robust and rich channel of collegial communication and support. So do feel free to continue. I see a couple of comments coming in. And great, thank you. But that's my point, right? And you know this because you've been teaching in this kind of a environment as well, is that I want to be here with you, and then I look over there and then I lose my train of thought. So that's why I'm not necessarily going to do that, except for a couple of times when I have a question for you, and I'll invite you to answer that in the chat box. And other than that, I think it might be wise if you want to hold your questions until that designated time at the end. And I see some nodding heads, so we'll plan to do that. Okay, with that, let's get on with the show. Let me go ahead and pull up my slides. And yeah, we're here today to remind ourselves of what motivates us, because here's what I know from 25 years of teaching online and in-person classes, is that it's really easy to get your head down in the trenches and to get overwhelmed by the amount of work, especially in this season, trying to be flexible, trying to adapt to changing circumstances, to support students who might be quarantining. It just is a lot of work. And what I want to encourage us to do today is to get our head out of the trenches and look up and remember why we love what we do and how we can do it even more effectively. To begin, I would like to introduce you to my family. This is my husband. He is a strong partner and collaborator in my work. We have 3 teenage daughters, which is awesome. They are so cool. Middle school and high school. They're all actually at school right now, which was different than last year. They stayed home and did remote learning last year. When it is not a global pandemic, we love to travel, especially overseas whenever we can. So there's a couple of pictures of us in London. One is in the London Eye, the other one is in Piccadilly Circus, my favorite place on the planet. And in the bottom corner, you're going to see what online learning has been looking like at my house last year. So that's 2 of my daughters sitting and playing a game on the living room floor while they're in Zoom class. And so while that's not ideal, by the way, the one daughter, see the one with the leopard print pajama pants, she told me last night that those are like her most embarrassing pants, and she can't believe that I show it to lots of people. So I was like, oops, sorry. Anyway, they're in Zoom class and they're playing a game. There's a little one coming into Samantha's window, I see. And that's the reality that we're living with. So observing my daughter's experience and their hardworking teachers' really heroic efforts last year has given me many new insights and perspectives since having written Small Teaching Online, which was pre-pandemic, right? But I've been able to focus and really do a lot of research in this last pandemic season, 18 months or so. And so I do have, again, well, actually, let me unpack what I did just here and why I did that. And while I unpack it, I'm going to go ahead and bring down the slides and I'll tell you why. And that is because research is showing that eye strain is a thing. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it yourself in Zoom classes, but that asking students to look at slides for extended periods of time kind of increases that eye strain. And so I would encourage you, when possible, to plan a variety of activities and bring down those slides when you can. Now, here's another reason why I'm doing that in this moment is because the slides themselves are kind of a barrier between you and me. And so I like to remove the barriers, strengthen the connections, and that's why I brought that down. But let me explain why I have that slide and what you might want to think about doing in your classes as well. One of the themes that you will see strongly emerge from my talk today is how important it is to connect with your students. And that came out so clearly. I just caught the very end of the previous presentation. And what I heard was that ACC students want to connect with you and want to connect with each other. They want to build those relationships, form those interactions. And that's not unique to ACC students. That's what all of our students are asking for. So whatever modality you're teaching in, whether it's in person, whether it's remote synchronous like this, live online, whether it's asynchronous online, some kind of mix of all of those, I would encourage you to make more of an effort than you may have done before to let your students see a little bit of the real you. So I have that slide in there to show you who I am when I'm not in my Zoom box. It helps you to see that I am a real person with a life, with hobbies and interests, and with crazy kids in leopard print pajamas. So I would encourage you to think about something like this. If you're teaching online live like this, maybe you have a slide. If you don't want to show the faces of your family, that's okay, no problem. Put hobbies, put pictures of your pets. Everybody loves to see pets, your favorite destinations. Just help your students see you as a real person, especially when you're teaching online. If you're teaching asynchronous online, you might have like a little all about me video, some of these kinds of ways of helping students see that you're real and not a teaching robot. If you're teaching in person, you have the advantage. But still, I would encourage you to, and the reason I said that actually is because I fully believe that it is easier to foster connections in person than it is online. So you do have an advantage, but again, I would encourage you to think about deliberate and intentional ways of connecting with your students and helping them connect with each other. And I suspect that in the TLA this year, you're going to have lots of opportunities to think about that. So I'm going to come back to the slides, and I have a question for you now. And again, I will invite you to answer in the chat box in just a word or a few words if you like. This is not obligatory. If you don't want to answer, that's okay. But if you do, I'd ask you to think about, what motivates you to be an excellent teacher? Just maybe put a word or a few words in the chat box. Dopamine. Okay, good. That light bulb moment that you love the subject, you have a passion, it's service to others, your students motivate you, the success of your students, the engaged citizenry, You're a servant. Your students' efforts motivate you. You're committed to helping your students, that one scrolled past me, make their lives better. Yes, of course you are. You're paying it forward. You want to lift your students up beyond where you can reach. You want to help your community, empathy to their students' needs. You love to see that students have confidence in themselves, seeing the student find the success and the satisfaction, paying forward student engagement, seeing them learn to think in new ways. That's such a valuable life skill, especially for the future that we are facing. Promoting your profession to future younger generations, teaching students new skills. Like many of my students, I am first generation college, so I understand the path that they are on. Well, you know what? We're done here. You just gave all the answers. I can close up shop and go home. You are here for these right reasons. It is your students who motivate you to be the best teacher that you can be. But once again, I just want to acknowledge that sometimes that's easy to lose sight of. And I want to introduce you to a student of mine named Lori. This is not actually Lori, and that is not actually her name, but I want you to imagine that this is Lori. She took my class, my online graduate class. That's what I'm currently teaching. A couple of years ago, probably 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. She took my class, and in this class, it's actually tech fluency and leadership. It's about learning how to use technology well. And one of the assignments is to record a video of yourself to introduce yourself. And I deliberately say you have to show your face. Now, I feel a little prescient about that because little did I know the whole world was going to need to get more comfortable in these online video interactions. But in this class, I was telling them, hey, video interviews, video meetings, these are the way of the future. I want you to start to get more comfortable talking to the camera. So I required that. There was points if you did not record your face, which, by the way, there are sometimes culturally sensitive reasons not to ask students to, or require them, I should say, to show their face. But in this case, it really was tied to my course learning outcomes. And so everybody in the class did their video, and many of them were like, oh, I feel kind of weird. This is weird. I'm nervous, but I'm going to do it. So I could tell that everybody had a little discomfort. But Lori just posted a picture of herself and her small son, and she wrote a little introduction. And I thought, come on, you can't even post a video. Like, okay, so I docked her points and I moved on. Didn't really think very much more about it. But then after, throughout the course of the semester, she was a great student. She did things on time. She was really engaged in the online class. I never had any other concerns with her. And on the day after the class ended, I got an email from Lori. And she wrote, I wanted to ask, I noticed that I was just looking at my grades and I noticed that I'm just shy of an A. And I also see that I missed an assignment right at the end. That's not like me. I don't know how I did that. Would you please allow me to consider, or would you consider allowing me to turn that in late? And this is the day after the class ends. So at this point in the email, I'm like, class is over. Well, I kept reading. And she said, I also want to explain something that's been bothering me all semester. She proceeded to explain that there was a reason that she hadn't posted a video in that introductory assignment. The week before, the father of her child had come to the house to pick him up, to take him out. He was swaying, he was drunk. She called him on it. They stepped outside the house where he was just going to say goodbye to his son. He knelt down. There was a little boy, knelt down. And when he came back up again, he was wearing knuckle dusters and he beat her in the face outside of their house in the street. And her little guy was there watching it. And at the time that I required this video, she was still so swollen and bruised and disfigured. She lost teeth. And these were all the reasons why she was not willing to show her face on camera. And she wrote to me, I had suffered enough shame in that moment. And now I'm facing thousands of dollars of bills to repair this damage. I couldn't, bring that shame into my class. So I posted the picture, you docked the points, and I moved on. And I will tell you, I sobbed. I'm welling up right now thinking about it. I was just, oh my gosh, I make these policies, I make these assignments, and I forget that these are people. I had come to see my online students as names in a grade center, as tasks on a grading list. I literally forgot that they are people in my classes with lives and concerns and things that I have no idea of what's going on. Now, again, this was pre-pandemic. By the way, you'll be happy to know I did allow Lori to turn in that assignment. She got that A. And I trust that she finished her master's degree and is making that better life for herself and her son. But it just really shook me up in a way that is still, as you can see, still really resonates with me. So speaking of shaking up, that was kind of pre-pandemic. That was before we were in the crisis that we're in right now. And as I've reflected on the situation that we're in, it has really become clear to me that higher ed has been absolutely shaken to its core. We have never experienced a situation like this. But it wasn't just the pandemic. In March of 2020, many of us had that emergency shift to remote or online instruction. But before we had really come to grips with it, and that was hard. That was hard for people who hadn't been teaching in these formats, for people who were anxious about the pandemic and facing loss of their own. But before we had really come to grips with what this teaching format was like, we had the death of George Floyd, and that hit us in May 2020, and it caused a tremendous reckoning of racial justice and all kinds of things that we're still navigating even now. So I would argue, as we look to the year ahead, as we look to beyond COVID-19 and the future of higher education, I believe we have a choice. I think those twin asteroids hit higher ed, and we can be like the avian dinosaurs on the left here that, is it your left? Anyway, you see the avian dinosaurs that responded to the impact, the proposed asteroid impact that wiped out the dinosaurs, and they became the birds that we know today. Or we can be like the dinosaurs who just try to keep on doing things the same way and die out. I would argue that the pandemic absolutely increased inequities, that this is a story, and I understand this is a little bit far from where we are when we're in our community college settings, but I still find this story really kind of interesting and relevant and gives us something to think about. So this is from an April 2020 story in the New York Times. These are two students at a liberal arts East Coast college. That's why I said I know it's a little far away from a community college, but still bear with me because it's kind of insightful on what our students are going through. In March, when their campus closed, the student on the left, she went to her family's second home in the Hamptons, and the student on the right went to her family's food truck in Florida. They had both been students on equal footing at this college. The student on the right she was a valued and respected member of the lacrosse team. People didn't really know about her background. They didn't need to know. She was a part of the college community. But all of a sudden, when she got home, now being asked to turn on her cameras, it's a very, she didn't really want to show that she was logging in from her family's food truck. That was a very different way of life to what her colleagues, her peers were experiencing. And that is what we have seen over and over again, that students of color, historically marginalized students, are really struggling in different ways, in inequitable ways, in this pandemic. But it's not, of course, only higher ed. This pandemic is affecting our whole society, where it is, really disadvantaging some groups over the others. And we know that, we see that. But, recently I came across this report from the Postsecondary Value Commission. It came out in May 2021. Equitable value promoting economic mobility and social justice through post-secondary education. And this has been highly inspirational to me, to remind me of why we do what we do, because we want to help our students make that better life for themselves, for their kids, for their families. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting that wake-up call, like I did with Lori, to kind of shake us out of some routines. And sometimes it's a matter, like we want to do today, of taking a moment and taking a breath and going, hey, this is important work. And we have the opportunity to literally make the world a better place. This report is so impactful that I actually want to just read you a little tiny bit out of it. I know you probably didn't want me to come here and read you a report, but just a little snippet from the foreword of this Value Commission, which, by the way, was, who is this? Who wrote this? I should have had that ready to go. It's written by the Institute of Higher Education Policy and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation staff with a robust advisory and research team. Here's what the foreword says. The insidious ways that racism, classism, and sexism continue to play out in modern day American society have been laid bare by a national reckoning with a pervasive racial bias and the COVID-19 health crisis. And while both crises have rocked American society to its core, by the way, I made my slides before they wrote this. Maybe they saw my presentation, I don't know. Rocked the American society to its core, they have also served as a catalyst for many, including our colleges and universities, to critically reflect on their role in perpetuating or dismantling systemic injustices. Post-secondary education can offer individuals the opportunity to earn a livable wage and build a better life for themselves and their families, while also fostering a healthier and more democratic society. Yet, post-secondary education must do more to dismantle its own inequitable policies and practices. And so it just goes on to say that there's economic benefits to having college credentials, including sufficient earnings, high quality jobs, economic mobility, and security. And there's non-economic benefits, including things like exposure to new cultures, people, and ideas, fostering personal growth, preparing them to be engaged, equity-minded members of a society who are able and willing to disrupt injustices and right past wrongs. So again, this report is out very recently, and it has been very impactful in my own thinking, just reminding us of the importance of the work. However, let's come back to our slides. I think it's also very, very important to recognize that we are all understandably anxious. We have already been through the ringer, and the ringer keeps getting tougher. We are stressed out. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's countless stories in the news media and the higher ed media right now about how what colleges are doing. Are they starting online? Are they pivoting? Do they have a secret plan for pivoting that they're not telling everybody about? I attended a student panel just this week that was being hosted by the Chronicle of Higher Education, and the students on the panel were saying, would you at least just tell us if maybe there's a chance we're going to go remote? Why, a little more transparency. We understand we're living this too, but the students are freaking out. We are freaking out. Administrators are freaking out. Everybody is. There's a lot that we're trying to manage right now. And as we look at where we're going from here, we know that technology is absolutely a big part of what we're going to be doing. There will be more online blended and hybrid offerings. Students have seen the flexibility, they appreciate it. We have all collectively understood that life happens in a way that that maybe wasn't necessarily at the top of our mind. So more online teaching and learning interactions, it's definitely a thing, but it's not just about the technology. It is 100% about your teaching and your teaching excellence. That is what your students want. That is what your students need. Sometimes I am asked, what even is the point of a college credential, whether that be from a 2-year college or whether that be from a 4-year college? What people can go to YouTube, people can Google it. They don't really need a college degree anymore. And you see that a lot in the media, which actually was why that Value Commission report was created, is to answer that objection. And I 100% believe that the value of the college learning experience is you. Your students need your expertise. They need your guidance. They need your compassion and your understanding and your willingness to flex a little bit here and there. They need your ability to communicate and explain complex problems and give them feedback. We know that we learn better when we get feedback on our approach. And, I've really thought a lot about the work of Jose Bowen. He is the author of a new book. I think the title of it actually changed a little bit. It's coming out like literally next month. And it's about the new 3 R's of education, which he would identify as relevance, rigor, and relationships. And, we heard again, although I only tuned into the last few minutes of the prior presentation, relationships was being expressed there in terms of what students want. They want to feel connected with you and with each other. And Jose Bowen has invited us to think about the fact that our students are different than they were 30, 40 years ago. Now, I gather in this group, some of you are also first-generation students, and maybe you feel closer to where your students are. That is wonderful. I think in higher ed in general, we need to realize that these are not the students that we had 40 or 50 years ago. They may not be the students that we were. Maybe we don't really resonate quite as closely with some of our students. Maybe if you think about it, in higher education, we loved it so much that we chose to spend our life in the classrooms and in the research labs, and that may not characterize all of our students. Our new majority students are, again, juggling many, many competing demands on their time. And it is our job to really help them to make that successful outcome. But there is one more thing that the Jose Bowen talks about, which I really like and has been helpful to me. And that, back to what I was saying a minute ago about the feedback and how we need that in order to grow and get better and learn. He likes to talk about the feedback that a tennis net gives. The tennis net does not grade you on your serve or on your backhand. What it does is it tells you if you got the ball over the net or not. And so that kind of feedback, just to help us develop skills, and that's what your students need from you. I've also thought quite a lot about the work of Michelle Miller. She's a colleague of mine at Northern Arizona University, and she has really helped me think deeply about how technology can empower learning science. And I know in the TLA, you've got a lot of learning science embedded into the program. And Michelle has really helped me to think about what we can do better with technology in order to help students spend meaningful time on task. Here's what we know about students. They believe that if they read their books and read their notes and highlight and reread, that they're good, that they have the information and it's in there, it's right in their brain. They also believe if they cram and do that really quick before the exam, they'll be fine on the test. Well, the problem is on that second point, they're right. They actually will do good in the short term, but ask them again 2 months later, a lot of that information has vanished because it wasn't really deeply embedded in their memory in the first place. However, based on learning science, there's a lot that we can do with technology, Blackboard Learn discussions or quizzes or various tools that we have available to us that can help students spend that more meaningful time on task, not just reading and rereading, but really applying new information, practicing with it, interacting with it, exploring it. And so just again, as we think about the role that tech will continue to play in our teaching, let's embrace it as a power tool that we can put to work to help our students learn more effectively. And finally, I want to introduce you to Courtney Plotz. And it's really cool. I actually have a call with her after this today. I'm going to be able to hang out with Courtney a little bit. I love her work. She is doing a lot of important work on culturally responsive online teaching. And so understanding that people come from different cultural backgrounds and they have diverse views and beliefs and values that are shaped by the way that they were brought up, even if they, some of our students grow up in America, but inside their home, they may have a very different cultural experience. And what we know is that here in America, rugged individualism is the thing. And really our higher education systems, I would say all of education is really kind of built on that individual transactional, even if we do have group projects and we should foster those collaborations, but we still at the end of the day give a grade to a student. It is very individualistic. But Courtney and others have helped me to see that students from Black households, Latinx households, Indigenous households, Asian American, Pacific Islander, there's a lot of cultures that have a more collectivistic viewpoint, a more interdependent viewpoint, where we process and learn information together, and we learn by talking and sharing. And so understanding that when we bring in that more social aspect, it's actually a culturally responsive approach. And again, I really do love what Courtney has said. She's speaking in the voice of a student. If I think you care about me more than the task, I will engage with you. And when we know that our students are, what we do know is when our students are engaging with us, they are more connected, they are more motivated, and they are more likely to be successful. So no matter what class we are teaching, no matter what space we're teaching in, it is so important to really think differently about cultivating connections and community. And the reason I say differently is because I don't know about you, I've been teaching 25 years. This was not always on the forefront of my mind, especially, when I first started, or even as recently as a few years ago. I did not go into my classroom going, hey, we really got to make sure we're building a learning community. That wasn't really forefront of my mind. However, based on the research, the literature, and based on our collective experience here during this pandemic, I have come to believe that this is honestly the most important thing that you can do. If you want your students to deeply engage and learn your material, we need to pay more attention to building these relationships. And that really struck home with me one day in my Pilates class. I do teach Pilates. You may have seen that on the slide. Teach at my local gym. And I was going in one day. It was a beautiful June day. In fact, it was so beautiful, I thought maybe nobody's going to come to class because who's going to want to, come inside. But I rounded the corner into the hallway where the studio is, and I saw a woman with her rolled up yoga mat standing outside the open door. She was standing in the hallway. And first I thought, oh, good, somebody came to class. But then I thought, why doesn't she go in? And immediately I was able to answer myself. It's because she didn't know if she was supposed to. And so because I picked up on that in the moment, the door was open, but I hadn't arrived yet. So the lights were off. There was no music playing. And I picked up on this frustration from her. Is class happening? Am I in the right place at the right time? What's going on? I made the effort to come in. And so because I noticed that in the moment, I said to her, are you here for class? And she said, yes. And I said, great, me too, come on in. We got the lights on, the music going, more people showed up for class, and it really helped me to see the value and the importance of connecting with people. Now, again, many of us are teaching in online environments right now, and you think especially about the different experience that students have clicking into Blackboard, where usually they don't see anybody there. That's just the design of those platforms, is you don't really see anybody. Or even if they're clicking into Zoom class or its equivalent, it's nowhere near the same as greeting your student in the hallway and saying, hey, I'm glad you're here. So we have to work overtime in these online environments to help our students plug in and connect. And again, I would certainly argue that teaching in person, if you're teaching in masks, that's another kind of a barrier that can sort of dampen effective communication and collaboration. So really recognizing how other people can help us be successful is important. Now, it's funny, that same day, something else happened. I must have been very thoughtful about teaching and learning in general. That same day, I was getting ready to start, and I noticed these two yoga mats super duper close together. It was a big fitness room, a beautiful day, small turnout. There was no reason we had to be this close together, but I had another little inkling. And often at the beginning of class, I said, is anybody brand new to Pilates? And sure enough, the super close yoga mat, she raised her hand. And I thought, I know what happened. You're new to Pilates. You were nervous about that. You came with a friend who's more comfortable here, and you put yourself really, really close because you wanted to peek over. Am I doing it right? Just have some physical reassurance of, just literally from the proximity. And that, again, made me think deeply about how in a classroom, students can turn to each other and say, hey, what page are we on? What happens? Or even if they don't do that, there's sort of ambient cues. Oh, everybody's getting the notebook out. I guess I better get out some notes and take some notes right now. So there's a lot of ways that we are very social as learners, and this pandemic and other factors makes it harder to connect with each other. But I would 100% believe that despite Tim Cook, I don't know if you're familiar with this, he's the CEO of Apple, and he is on a relatively recently formed commission to talk about alternative credentialing and how college credentials are not necessary. You can go to your Google coding camp for 6 months and you can walk out of there and get a job. Well, despite what he thinks, I see tremendous value in a college degree. And the authors of this report, The Future of Undergraduate Education, the Future of America, agree with me. Or I should say, I agree with them, because I read this in 2017 and it has had a profound impact on my thinking. They would argue that the very future of our society depends on offering equitable and inclusive education to our undergraduates. And I would also say effective education, because sometimes there are things that we can do better to support our students. Indeed, they would argue that the very future of our society hangs on our ability to be more effective in our classes. They claim that national priority one is to help our students learn more effectively. And again, as the educators, we know that we have a big role to play in helping our students learn that new information. That's why you're going to be looking at, learning science and how we learn, all that kind of thing in this TLA. But, again, there is a lot of call right now for what's even the value of a college degree. Well, as the authors of the Postsecondary Value Commission report say, there's a lot of value. This is the work of the Lumina Foundation. They have been doing a lot of work for a long time, arguing that, again, our society as a whole is stronger when people have post-secondary credentials. They have a goal of getting to 60% attainment of some kind of a credential after high school by 2025. Right now, we're at 51.3% of Americans over age, oh, there you go, you see ages 25 to 64 have that post-secondary degree or credential of some kind. Their goal is 60% by 25. We have some work to do. And I find this kind of motivating enough, but then when I look at this information, it makes me stop in my tracks. This is disaggregated data that shows that you see the yellow line there is where white student attainment is of some kind of credential. Again, they are including certificates, they're including trade, they're including all these different credentials. You see that the national average is about 43%, but then look a little lower in the graph and you see that our students of color are significantly behind in this attainment. And I don't know about you, I'm not okay with that. We can't build a more just and tolerant and equitable society. We cannot dismantle structural racism if our students of color are not achieving equal success. So this has really, again, given me a lot to think about. And I definitely believe that we are looking at a future that we can't even imagine, right? We know that we don't know what the jobs of tomorrow are. There are jobs that exist today that did not exist 10 years ago, and we don't know what those things are. But what we do know is that basic cognitive skills are easier to automate. And so we think about artificial intelligence and we think about chatbots and such. And for some people, these are bad words and we don't like the idea, but let's face it, we are going to be automating the more basic skills and steps and tasks. The things that we cannot automate are the things that computers don't do very well. They cannot solve unstructured problems. They cannot communicate in complex ways. And maybe they'll get there at some point, but what we know is that we need people to engage in tasks and jobs that require higher cognition. And so that, and do you know where students learn? Students, I gave away the answer. Do you know where people learn higher cognitive skills? In college. That's where we gain the exposure to different ideas, different concepts, different worldviews, different, subject matter. That helps us to become critical thinkers and creative problem solvers and more diverse and respectful of diversity as well. So we know, again, that increased earnings result. This is information that is taken from just a 2-year degree, I think, if I'm remembering this correctly. But basically, we know that a college degree increases the earning potential. Look at that, in Texas, there's a 98% increase with that college credential. But we know it's about more than money. And again, the authors of this May 21 Value Commission report said the same thing, that when people have that college credential, they're actually more likely to be more engaged and more involved in their community, more likely to volunteer. They are more likely to have that social and economic mobility. They're also more likely to live healthier lives and to enjoy more time with family and to be more rewarding work. There's another recent set of research that came out that said a 4-year degree, which we know, of course, students in a 2-year, and I don't know, maybe Austin does offer 4-year degrees. That anyway, when people get a 4-year degree, it actually increases their life expectancy. So that having that degree makes it likely that you'll have a longer and more fulfilling life. But it's not just about the individual benefits, it's for society as a whole. Again, we know that people are more civically engaged. I don't know about you, but I look at what happened at the Capitol on January 6th, and I think we need an engaged and critically reflective society of citizens. They are more likely to do that volunteer work. They are less likely to need assistance programs. They are less likely to be incarcerated. And so as a whole, society will benefit when we put our backs into helping our students get across the finish line. But how do we do that? Well, you probably could guess the answer at this point. In my opinion, it's by connecting. That is so important. I want to introduce you to Scott Robison. He is a colleague of mine at Portland State, and he has been doing research for years now on student experience in online classes. And we can kind of generalize this to all of our classes as well. And his findings show that over and over and over again, students just want to know that you are there and that you are engaged with them. Now, again, I feel like this is a particular challenge in online spaces because it's really easy to be behind the screen. Students talk about that all the time. Doesn't even feel like anybody's there on the other side of the computer. but they want to know that you're there. They want to know that you care about them. There's an article that came out in 2019 called, this is the title of the article, "I don't care what you know until I know that you care." And you may have heard that saying before. Some researchers at a community college looked at retention rates and looked at student success in terms of grades and progression, these kinds of things. And they were like, wow, what are those educators doing? What are those instructors doing that's so magical? Well, I'll tell you what, it wasn't anything fancy, pedagogical, or anything. It was that they've gotten to know their students. They exerted that little bit of extra effort to get to know their names, to learn how to pronounce their names correctly, to check in with their students in a little bit more of a deliberate way. And they found in their research that students want to know that they want to feel that the teacher cares about them. And so how do we work at connecting and helping everybody connect? Well, there's tremendous value in doing this work. I like to think about the work of Harriet Schwartz here, who wrote this post in April 2020. She's got a book called Connected Teaching. So again, kind of speaking my language. But in April 2020, she wrote this post about the importance of authentically connecting in a pandemic online. And this phrase of hers has resonated with me so much. She wrote that our students all want to know that we see them, that we care about them, and that they matter to us. And I feel like that's not always necessarily super evident. And again, I'm not blaming or shaming. I know there's been plenty of times when I've been like, I just got to get through my grading. I have too much to do. That is easy to do, but let's remind ourselves of the importance of seeing our students. We talk about teaching equitable and inclusive classes. Well, our students want to be seen. They want to be heard. They do want that sense of belonging. They want to feel like they are welcome in our classes, and looking at them very deliberately and noticing what's happening in their lives, like Lori helped me to do, even though that was kind of an extreme example. You get the point. We need to interact with our students. And so here's one way that you could think about doing this. And I will invite you to engage with me in this activity and also to borrow it or steal it if you want to. This is Courtney Plott's handiwork. I would ask you right now to pick the picture that best represents the way you feel about your upcoming academic year. How do you feel about the upcoming academic year? If you want to, put a word or two in the chat box, and then maybe even a couple of words to say why. So choose a picture that best shows how you feel about your year ahead and why. The cat, because you're nervous. Exactly. The cat. Some people see that cat and think it looks playful. Hummingbird, stretching and working hard to achieve. Yes. The dog, curious and anticipating. The hummingbird, hoping to return to face to face. The mountain, there are heights to be reached. The balloons, we can only go up from here. The mountain, lots to achieve. The window, the year feels pretty overwhelming. The mountains, a challenge but attainable. Hummingbird, I'm doing something more exciting. The dog looks so eager. The dog, because I'm excited to gas up my students and give them support and energy. Love that. Oops, I didn't mean to advance. Hold on. This work is worth doing, but I wasn't going to get to that talking point yet. Well, I'm there now, I guess. Oh, golly, now I've totally lost track of all my slides. Let's go back to this one just for a moment. And now I've lost the chat box. Oh, goodness. Okay, that's what teaching with technology is like. Optimistic because of the dog. The hummingbird going. The mountains, there is no ceiling to learning and success. So here's what I love about this activity is it allows us to connect with each other in a way that is not necessarily related to our topic. I mean, you can. I asked you a question, how you're feeling about teaching this year, or working in your role there. But it doesn't necessarily have to be about academics. You could ask a question like this to your students, and you could say, how are you feeling about how your weekend went? Or how are you feeling about how all of your classes are going right now? You can tie it into their experience in college. How are you feeling about our next exam? You can ask that question in lots of different ways, either more social or more academic, and it shows your students that you care about them. I recommended this strategy to a faculty member last September, and she told me that in December, when students were doing their course evaluations at the end, that they thanked her. She actually chose to do this every single week. She came up with different images, different slides. You could also ask students to come up with different images, or find a GIF or a meme, whatever. There's lots of variations on this. But she told me that unsolicited, her students thanked her for doing this activity because it helped them to feel that she cared about them, and it helped them to take a moment to check in with themselves. And they really found value in that. So this is kind of what I mean. Like, I never would have done this in my classes 5 years ago. I'm going to be honest. I would not have, hey, how are you doing today? Students like check in. But I've come to see the increasing importance of taking class time to do this, whether it is live synchronous like this, whether it's something you do in the classroom, whether it's an online discussion forum in Blackboard. Make that deliberate effort to check in with your students, to connect with them, to demonstrate that you care about them. And just one more quick sort of tip here, you'll notice that there's a range of pictures on this slide. Some of them are brighter and more optimistic. Some of them are a little darker. Some of them are nuanced. Some people look at that mountain picture and feel like it looks like foreboding and daunting and discouraging. But the idea, represent a lot of different frames of mind, and ask your students. We're all very visual people. This is another way of connecting and communicating with them. So you already got a sneak preview of where we're going here, and I am coming to the end of my presentation. And then again, we'll have that time for questions. Now, I do want to actually pause and say, while I'm here, if you have really practical questions, today was a little more sort of motivational, theoretical, but if you want to ask a practical question, I'm really happy to talk about those things as well. So let me wrap up here and remind us all that this work really is worth doing. I am 100% convinced that you are making the world a better place. And just a reminder too, that this actually is the heart of the American dream. This is probably not something that we reflect on all the time, but the founding fathers of this country argued that an educated citizenry is a vital requisite for a free society. This is Thomas Jefferson, I think. I'm pretty sure it is. I need to check my facts. Still, what I know, yeah, I think it is him. He is credited with really arguing for the importance of educating the populace. And many of you said that at the very beginning. And again, I think about the events on January 6th at the US Capitol. I think about the polarized political world that we're in right now. I think about the two Americas that exist with the educated, the rural, and that probably wasn't fair, but people who don't go on to pursue a college credential of some kind. We are really a divided country right now. And I believe education is the key. I believe that as we move forward from here, we can be stronger, we can be more beautiful, we can help our students be stronger and more beautiful. And so I ask you again, as I wrap up my comments, what motivates you to be an excellent teacher? Or rather, who? For me, Lori shook me up, shaking me up again. I think it's so important to remember the people that we are serving, the people, the challenges that they are dealing with, the things they want to overcome to make that better life, and to remind ourselves that individuals making a better life for themselves benefits us all. It really is about the people that we are serving. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing, because these people are our future. These people are why we're here. They are our leaders. They are our innovators, our entrepreneurs, our problem solvers. They are the future, and it's worth investing in them. So I just want to say thank you for your attention during, like I said, a too long presentation. And we're going to have time now for your questions. So how would we want to proceed with this? Do people want to put questions in the chat box? What are our thoughts?
It can be usually effective if people do a hand raise. So you can use the hand raise reaction, and then you can call on them and they will ask their question. Some people will feel more comfortable chatting it in, so I'll try to keep an eye on the chat as well.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Yes, please, if anybody does want to raise a hand, let me make sure I'm looking at where the hand raisings are. I would love to hear from some of you.
I see a hand raised from Sarah.
Yeah, go ahead, please, Sarah.
I'm sorry, I had to put my microphone in. I'm not sure if I put it in correctly. Okay, awesome. I struggle with the showing the video or not showing the video. I think that's something that we talked about earlier before you arrived into this TLA cohort, in that I do want people to feel like they're connected to each other. I also appreciate when people don't want to be on camera, but I also feel like if they know they're going to be on camera, then maybe they would make the effort. And so I don't know. I mean, like you gave a great example of when it would be totally appropriate for someone not to share. And I haven't been like really pushing it this semester, but then also I would worry about losing that place to have that connection. What are your thoughts on that?
And just to clarify, you're talking about like teaching live synchronous like this, for example?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to second your question because I was involved in a research project this past summer, and you don't know how many college freshmen that I heard say, well, I would log into Zoom and then go back to sleep. Like literally that's what they were saying that their experience was. And I was like, oh my gosh. Now, that is a complex situation. I do have a few thoughts to share with you and a couple of strategies to recommend as well. Certainly, it can be an equity issue. In Lori's case, that would have been absolutely unfair. But even still, we know at this point that for example, the student who went to the food truck, she did not want to reveal her lower socioeconomic status. We know that sometimes students literally don't have the equipment. I was pretty surprised. I teach an online graduate class, and in July, my student said, oh, sorry, my laptop doesn't have a camera. I'm like, wow, who doesn't have a camera? But okay, I should not assume that. So we know that sometimes access to technology, access to good internet, good enough internet for video, these are challenges that students may be facing. Maybe they're at home with family members, they really don't feel comfortable turning on that camera. So what we also know is it really does help. We know that, right, Sarah? You turned on your camera just to be able to make that connection with me. I know that's why you did that, and it really does help. So my recommendations include, based on research that already came out during the pandemic about why students don't turn on their cameras, what students said was that they didn't have their camera on because nobody else had their camera on. And so the researchers recommended that just literally setting the norm that in this class, we try to have our cameras on when we can. Just literally making an explicit statement like that would help students feel more comfortable, and they wouldn't feel like kind of spotlighted if they're the only ones with the camera on. The other recommendation that I have is, I have two more. One is to be transparent with your students and say, hey, I know not everybody wants to have their cameras on all the time, or maybe you're in a place where you can't. And we will have a better learning experience together if you would be willing to turn on your camera when you can. And just be really transparent about saying, it helps me relate with you, helps you connect with each other. So when it's possible, please consider turning on your camera. And last but not least, I would also be intentional about the way that you sequence class activities. So for example, maybe you're going to lecture for 12 minutes with slides. You can tell your students, hey, while I'm lecturing, don't worry about having your camera on, because it really is actually distracting and exhausting too. People tend to look in their little window and am I looking okay? It really is highly distracting. Research is showing that. But you could tell them, go ahead and keep your cameras off during this part of the class, but when we get to the discussion part or when we go into breakout groups, that would be a really great time to turn on your cameras if you can. So I definitely think that we can give more guidance. And, here's one way that I've thought about this, and then I'll get to the next question. In I would say in early childhood, preschool, kindergarten, this kind of thing, we spend a lot of time training kids how to be students. We spend a lot of time orienting them to appropriate behaviors and where they go and what they do in the classroom. And I feel like we're at that moment again right now. All of us, even though we now have about a year and a half under our belts, it's still a newer environment. We don't have the established norms in Zoom and these kinds of places. So taking a little bit of class time to train your students about expectations and norms and appropriate behaviors might be well worth doing. So with that, I will turn to the next question.
I think that's me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my question, one of my biggest struggles in the classroom, I'm a very new instructor. I've only been teaching for 3 years. And so one of the things that I still struggle with is responding to students' more personal stories in a way that makes them feel validated without asking them additional questions that might prolong discussion. Because that's my immediate response is like, oh, I want to know more about that. That's what I would do in an interpersonal interaction, right? But in the classroom, I don't have time to spend 15 minutes talking about this story. So how do I respond in a way that will validate them?
It's a good question. And I think the most important thing is that you're thinking that through, which is not much of an answer. But to me, the fact that you are really thoughtful about that and not either just, brushing off something that's kind of significant to a student or just allowing yourself to be sucked in for 20 minutes, the very fact that you're trying to figure out how you're going to walk that line, I think is the most important thing. Let me put it that way. Other than that, without knowing the details of your particular context, I guess the ways, here's what comes to my mind. Communicating, and when I say communicating, I don't just mean like with words. I mean in body language, in immediacy kinds of behaviors like eye contact and literally physically going a little bit closer to those people. Communicating that you do care about them, that you do see them, that you do understand they have the concern. And then I guess for me, it might be, do you want to follow up with me later? And that might not completely solve the time concern, because I know that teaching can be a sort of a pit of, of time consuming activities, but you could say, okay, we do need to stay focused right now, but if you would like to make an appointment or something like that, maybe that would be a way to help you kind of walk that line. But, you know, the other thing that I thought you were going to say is we do have to maintain the boundaries too. We're not our students' best friends. We're not their therapists and their counselors. We want to show them that we see that they're people and they have lives and concerns and joys and challenges, but we need to also maintain the professional boundaries. And my full belief, you said you've been doing this 3 years. I fully believe that we develop those kinds of boundaries and comfort levels with more experience. I bet you already have since the time that you very first started teaching. So just finding that balance for you personally, I believe we all have teacher personas, and we need to kind of figure out what works for us and for our students. And I think you're on the right track to doing that. So I believe several questions came in from the chat box, but of course I wasn't reading them. Does anybody want to, Jeff, did you want to voice any of those, or shall I just start kind of scrolling through?
I am looking at one from Kristen asking if there's a list or a database somewhere of great community building exercises, or, you know, I would add in just a book. Yeah, good question. And I'm actually going to go ahead and type this into the chat box, even though it's not going to appear near Kristen's question. Here's a website that I could highly recommend. It is kind of geared toward online environments, again, because many of us feel like you have to make an even more exerted effort in online spaces. If you Google this, I don't have the URL. If you Google 1HE Equity Unbound, it is a phenomenal resource, a free resource of quick little things like that, which picture best activity you can do. In fact, I'll walk through one more that I learned about from their site. We'll do it right now. And that is to, well, I guess when I say we'll do it, let me just model it for you this time. That is to invite your students to bring something from home. And this can be a very culturally responsive activity because people could choose to bring something that represents their cultural heritage, or and this is really a key point, we want to invite people to share about their cultural background, but not necessarily put them on the spot or require it. So this activity, and you would give your students advance notice, that's why I said don't, let's not ask our students, but this activity would be bring something from home that's meaningful for you, and it could be cultural or it could just be something that supports your well-being. This is a beautiful little basket. It came from the KwaZulu-Natal people in South Africa. And my dad, you don't know this about me, my dad is from South Africa, grew up there. We have family there, and I've had the opportunity to visit there. So now you know a little tiny bit more. I'm not going to, go on and on, but that is part of my heritage, and I'm really, really proud of that. And I would also say, if people don't want to do a cultural sharing, you could say, bring something to class. It could be a picture that you post in a discussion forum, all kinds of ways to do this. Bring something that supports your well-being. Well, I would show you my webinar cup. This is my security blanket. If I don't have my webinar cup, I can't do this. And so that's another kind of example of a quick little activity that just fosters those person-to-person connections. That website that I mentioned, and then, somebody found the URL. Thank you, Samantha. As far as books go, there are, in fact, I'm pretty sure there's a whole raft of books like coming out on this topic about how do we foster these kinds of connections. I will put a shameless plug in for my new book that's coming out on emotion science and strengthening the connections through emotion science. It's going to be out next year. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of people kind of working on this because there's a collective awareness that we can do better, and it really does in fact impact student learning, help them to be more effective. So what else? I do think some other questions came in, but of course I wasn't reading them. Oh, should we take Richard's? The different types of course structures. Do you think one offers more opportunity for creating community and engagement? So I'll just read the question again, just in case people didn't see it. Of the different types of course structures like hybrid, high flex, face-to-face, and others, do you think one offers more opportunity for creating community engagement? Well, I'll be honest, my sort of go-to / gut instinct answer is in person.
And I know that's kind of a challenge right now. And then I got a pushback from somebody that I was talking to, and they're like, okay, but seriously, and picture a large university with those giant lecture halls and literally hundreds of students. And the pushback that I got was like, really? And those really big classes, that's better than what we could do here in Zoom, for example, where we can be face-to-face. So I still feel, I'm 100% convinced that we can connect more effectively in person. Let's imagine if we were all in the same room today, this would be a very different experience. I would love to have circled around the tables and chatted with lots of you, and it would have felt very, very different. So what I definitely think, though, Richard, is that, as I mentioned before, these other modalities like hybrid, high flex, online synchronous, which wasn't really a thing before the pandemic very widely, I think these are here with us to stay. And so for me, it's about recognizing the barriers created by the distance, created by the screens, and looking for ways to make class time, to be intentional, to foster those relationships and such as well. So a few additional thoughts. I just now see, Elizabeth, your question about whether I want you to have your cameras on now. Thank you for asking that. And my comfort level that I have developed over time is, like Sarah did and Nance, if you do want to unmute and talk to me, I love it if you would turn on your camera. I actually had a strange one of these kind of events yesterday, and the culture at that institution was clearly that we do not turn on our cameras. It was very odd for me. So I appreciate it if you do, especially if you want to say something, but I also understand, like I said, we know for a fact it's draining and exhausting, and lots of cognitive resources just go to kind of figuring out, do I have something in my teeth? So, so thank you for asking.
Courtney chatted in an opportunity for you to plug your book.
Yes,
so
thank you.
Talk a little bit about the Small Changes book.
Yeah, thank you, Courtney. So that is the book that I wrote with Jim Lang, Small Teaching Online. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this work, Jim Lang wrote a book in 2016 called Small Teaching. And it really is about little changes that we can make in our classes so that they don't feel overwhelming. And he was kind of arguing that, instead of always figuring out the big changes that we have to make, like blending or like flipping our classroom, that sometimes there are very little things that we can do. And if they're based on what we know about how people learn, if they're based on learning science, that small change can have an outsized impact on student engagement and learning. And so, for example, one little thing he would recommend, and here's a bonus strategy, feel free to take this and use it. He would recommend that at the very beginning of a synchronous class meeting, that's the way I'll put it, that you would give students 5 minutes to recall what they learned last time. What did we talk about in the last class? Go ahead and jot down a few notes, a few bullet points, put your answers in the chat box, whatever. Give students 5 minutes to retrieve, and tell them not to look at their notes, right? They have to think back to what we did last time, and let's remember, collectively what we did. Well, so that is a really great way to foster retrieval practice. Every time somebody has to think back and remember something, it strengthens the neural pathway to that piece of information. And if what you're learning is new, the stronger those neural pathways, the more they're going to stick in your memory, or that piece of information. So Small Teaching was his work originally, really, really focused on in-person classes. And I had the opportunity to write Small Teaching Online with him. He wrote the theory, I wrote all the practical online stuff. And it's really, again, about the small changes that we can make in online classes that really have that outsized impact, a small thing. It shouldn't be overwhelming to grade. It shouldn't take longer than like 5 minutes to do it in class, or in an asynchronous class, 5 minutes of a short activity that you give students to do. But because it's based on learning science, it has a tremendous impact. And so I wrote that book. It came out in 2019. I did not expect it to have the uptake that it did, but in 2020, the whole world went online, and I do believe a lot of people have found it helpful. I've also received feedback that people get ideas from that book that enhance their in-person teaching as well. So just really my privilege to have been able to write that. Thank you for asking, Courtney.
And Samantha's had her hand up for a while. So
yes, sorry.
Go ahead, boss.
No, I was just going to ask you, so what piece of advice or pieces of advice do you have for maybe some of our new teachers, or those of us who have been teaching a really long time, and just need to reignite that purpose, reignite the passion that we have for our teaching, especially right now in this time. Do you have like what little piece of advice can you give us to just, really kind of fire us back up or define that purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I usually come into these conversations assuming that we do all love what we do, right? But I mean, I've kind of acknowledged a couple different times here today that sometimes it is easy to lose sight of that motivation, that passion, that purpose. And so I would encourage us, for me, it's a lot about mindfulness, and that deliberate mindfulness right before we go into an interaction with our students, whether it is here in Zoom, whether we're walking into the class, whether we are about to interact with people in Blackboard. It's about taking a moment to remind ourselves of why we love what we do. Now, again, I'm kind of assuming that we all get to teach our favorite classes and we never have to teach any classes that are not our favorite, right? I've been in the situation where I've had to teach some classes that I'm like, I don't really love this, but it pays the bills, right? I mean, I understand that happens too. But that's the focus that I've tried to bring today, is there really is a higher purpose. I really believe, I'm not kidding, and I'm not using hyperbole. I really believe that college educators are in fact superheroes. And so maybe you want to just record that. You're a superhero. I'm a superhero. Put that in your mind. Think about why what you're teaching is so relevant. Why do your students need to know it? Think about the bigger purpose that we talked about today for the overcoming systemic inequities and creating a more just and tolerable society. But for me, it's really about that few minutes before you go into class. And if you remember, Samantha, as we were on break, I said, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn off my camera and just kind of go dark for a minute. And that's exactly why I do that. I kind of give myself that little pep talk. I'm like, okay, we're here. And I really let myself focus. Now, I understand that, again, week by week, sometimes you kind of go into class, but in order to find that spark, taking a little bit of time to reflect on what we do. And I will, let me just add one quick thing to that. There is, and this is related to the new book that is in the works right now, research shows that when you bring your passion, like when you deliberately bring your energy and your enthusiasm into class, it's actually contagious. And so you can invigorate your students by pouring out your own energy. And that's something, again, I learned from Harriet Schwartz. Now, here's the thing. People are like, well, I'm not a bottomless well. I can't just keep on giving students all my energy all the time. But here's the magic. You give them energy, they give it back. You give them your passion, they respond, they engage with you, they renew your teaching joy and recharge your teaching battery because they are connecting with you. And so again, anything that we can do to bring that enthusiasm, that energy, that passion, that why is this important, and even connecting with our students too, it really does, it refills our own cups as well. So that wasn't super practical, but it was just more encouragement to be reflective of the importance of the work that we're doing. Thank you. I see a couple of wonderful comments. Sorry, Jeff.
I think that's covering most of the questions. So we've only got about 3 more minutes left. So if you wanted to have any final thoughts,
something did just
to share.
Yeah, I would like to share one more story. I'm a big believer in the power of stories, which of course I would encourage you to use in your own teaching as well, because stories are captivating and they are really motivating. As I was just answering you, Samantha, I thought of one more thing I wanted to say, but I didn't, because I just wanted to see if we had other questions. But if we don't, let me share this one more story. That daughter of mine who you saw in her embarrassing leopard print pajama pants, she, last November, the pandemic was surging, and she came to me one day, and she, we're all working and living at home. Like I said, now they're at school again, but that day we were all at home, and she came to me and she was really low. She was really, really blue. And she's like, Mom, why does this even matter? Why are we doing school? People are dying. Like, we could die. And she goes, and this is what my friends are saying too. Like, who cares about that stupid history project? This is so meaningless. And I was like, wow, like, you're right. Like, I can't argue with you on that. And I was thinking about, as I think it was it Nance who said, sorry, just meeting all of you for the first time. finding that balance between validating what the student says and not maybe going down the rabbit hole right at that moment. So I was standing there a moment thinking, how do I respond in a way that affirms my daughter's appropriate, feelings right now? Before I could even say anything, she said, but you know what? I care about Stearns and I don't want to let her down. So I'm going to do that project. And my daughter, Stearns, is her favorite history teacher. She loves her. And she proceeded to engage and dive in really deep and put together this amazing presentation on pirates in military history. It was so fun. She really got into it. And the only thing that got her over that legitimate slump of motivation was because she cared about her teacher and she didn't want to let her down. And that's what I would leave us with. I did harp on a little bit today about the importance of showing our students that we care about them. It sometimes is the only thing, it's the only lifeline they can hold on to get them over a hurdle and get them continuing to work and make that progress in your class. So I can't say it often enough. Yeah, it was a really fun project, but just really, really important to remind ourselves to try not to get caught up in the wheel of busyness that happens during the semester. I know that happens, but just see our people, see our students as people that are worth helping. So I'll end on that note.
Awesome. Thank you again. Samantha, you want to?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to come and speak to us today. I know that, all of us walked away with a little bit of a little pep in our step, or at least some time to something to reflect on as we go into the classroom in the new semester. So thank you everyone for joining us today to come and listen to this little gift that we got of Flowers time. So we will sign off for everyone except our TLA participants. Our day is not quite over yet.
Yes, so thank you again, and yeah, have a great semester. Thank you.
Thank you.